Welcome everybody back to the Writer's Parachute. We are here today with John Masiulionis. He is the managing PR person for PR from the Heart. If you guys remember him from Empowered Publicity, I've talked about him before. You will know that he is now coming out with PR from the Heart, and we'd love to talk to him. So we're going to have a conversation with him about marketing and promotion and all of those little nitty-gritty details that we find so fascinating, but so ridiculously hard to do. So John's going to help us with that. But before we get started, we have a little bit of housekeeping. Of course, don't forget to like, share, and follow the Writer's Parachute on YouTube. We're also over on Buzzsprout and most of the podcasting channels. If you don't see it, please send me a note in the comments and I will see about getting us up on that platform. But hopefully by the end of the month, we'll have all of them up and ready to go. Of course, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Writer Parachute with no S. And be sure to check the show description at the end for all of the links that we're going to talk about in today's show. Don't forget, as always, I will have a writing, publishing, marketing, or promotion tip. I suspect it's probably going to be marketing promotion today for you that we're going to pull the ripcord for on the end of the show. So to start off the show, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We've been talking just random questions and stuff like that. But today I want to talk about self-care. Self-care is a big part of working as an author writer, pretty much any kind of independent business that you do. You're going to have moments when you're working really long hours, you're struggling, it's really hard to turn it off. You get up in the morning and you're running. You skip lunch, you skip dinner, you're eating at your desk. And then it bleeds into your weekend, it bleeds into family time, it bleeds into everything else. So I've done it. I'm guilty. And this week I've had kind of a wake-up call. Now, I had a little bit of a wake-up call last year and in 2020, and I did try to heed it, but it was only a temporary fix that I had where I was changing my schedule and trying to take a little bit more time for myself. And that worked, right? But then I see I'm back here again. So now in 2022, we're going to do something new and we're going to talk about self-care, especially for independent authors and writers and those in that kind of business, because it is really easy to just put in hour after hour after hour and not take care of yourself. For me, it's about just shutting it down and taking the time off that I need. So I've actually created work hours for myself, office hours that I work during those hours. And when it's not those hours, unless it's a special situation, I'm not working during those hours. I turn it all off. I try to get off of social media. I try to get off of the devices and do something that brings me joy, that brings me some kind of care into my life. It makes my life a little easier because I need that downtime, because being a creative in any kind of level, whether you're an artist, an illustrator, a writer, whatever it is you're doing, that draws so much from you that you need to refill that bucket. You really need to get some self-care in your life. So I'm challenging you guys today to find one element of self-care for you. My element of self-care is to get off the social media. So please leave a comment or note in the comments about what it is you're going to be doing for self-care for yourself new in 2022. So let's go ahead and welcome our guest, John Masiulionis. And John, for nearly a decade, has been helping creatives to share their gifts and expand their audiences around the world. His ability to highlight the best of what someone brings to the table is uniquely exceptional. I can attest to that. With the power of enthusiasm and determination, John is a seasoned professional in taking ideas and transforming them into reality. As a publicist for inspirational, spiritual, and children's authors, along with coaches and speakers, John understands the challenges that aspiring and rising heart-centered entrepreneurs face as they step out with faith and follow their own path of service. He uses his networking savvy, well-developed organizational skills, and positive and dedicated support they need to fulfill their dreams and expand the reach of their work. John currently resides in San Diego, every month. You can see him on the CW, San Diego CBS Channel 8, and he shares the newest heart-centered children's books from the shining stars in the kid-lit community from PR from the Heart on empowering reads for kids. He also enjoys reading to children whenever he can, inspiring them to remember how much fun reading is, but also how it helps create magic and miracles in our lives. John has long-term plans, including releasing his own children's book and opening a children's hospice for terminally ill children in La Jolla. So welcome, John. How are you today? And welcome to the show, John. How are you today?
Donna, thank you so much for extending this heartfelt invitation. I really appreciate your free time. I'm doing well here in San Diego, and I want to congratulate you on the launch of your latest venture. You've had such a caring heart and continue to have that for children all around the world and in your support of children's authors. And I'm just so excited that you have this wonderful new creative platform to be able to share your gifts and help other authors and illustrators and those in the kidlit community shine their light as well too.
Well, thank you. It has kind of been just this surreal thing for me to try and do this podcasting and the writer's parachute and trying to get information out of the world. Now, I don't expect anybody to believe that I'm an expert. It's just I've just made so many mistakes that I can tell you how to get out of the jam that you got yourself in. So, and that's kind of where my heart kind of comes from, is because nobody really talks about the obstacles or the invisible walls that you run into. So that's what we hope to do here on the Writer's Parachute. So this company, PR from the Heart, has been a dream project for you for years. Can you tell us a little bit of how that journey started and how it evolved to what is now PR for the Heart, which is more heart-centered towards children's authors?
Absolutely, Donna. And I really feel that it took me 7.5 years to be in this particular point in time where I can be in my heart and serve from my heart. Whenever you're all of us are human beings, and many people that are tuning into your podcast are entrepreneurs in some way, shape, or form, or they have different things that they're taking care of, different people that they're taking care of. And life is all about practice. There's a term that's been around for a long period of time called Earth School. And many people think that like when you go to school, it's like you graduate from high school, okay, you're done. Then maybe if you go to college, then you're done after that. Maybe if you get your master's degree or your doctorate, then you're done after that. Each and every day, we learn. And my journey goes back to growing up. I wanted to be a sportscaster. I wanted to be able to be the next Chris Berman on ESPN. And I like to think that God and the universe had other plans. I began a near 25-year love affair with the world of professional wrestling and sports entertainment. Vince McMahon's WWE. Was given the opportunity to host a very popular wrestling radio show for a little over 10 years, a decade, called Monday Night Mayhem. And this started before the days of Facebook and Twitter and MySpace. And I throw MySpace in there because, all of us remember MySpace at some point in time, but Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, this was during the grassroots of you tell a friend, you tell a friend, you tell a friend, you tell a friend. And it became one of the first ever wrestling podcasts after I did it on my college radio show in Buffalo, where I resided previously up until moving out to San Diego. And it became one of the first wrestling podcasts. So traveled across the country to 5 WrestleManias and met a lot of my childhood heroes. And it was great. In many respects, I was losing who I was. My radio name was the Big Mosh. And I was over 300 pounds at one point in time. My last name is Masalonas. My high school gym teacher, Mark Resnick, used to call me Mosh, and I used to be bigger at that point, so hence the name. But I share this because I lost sight of who I was. And people love the Big Mosh because the Big Mosh could do things for people. So I share this because that was the earliest introduction to publicity work. I put out press releases and booked guests for my show and promoted the show and things of that nature. Still, going to school for broadcast at that point. So there were like a few different little tea leaves that were in place along the way. And then through my time at Monday Night Mayhem, I was introduced to the team at Children's Hospital in Buffalo, now Oshai Children's Hospital. And I learned that each children's hospital across the country, for the most part, has what's known as a child life department. They provide emotional support and entertainment for children who are going through dialysis, who are recovering from surgeries, and who are going through cancer. And so whenever the wrestlers would come through town, I would call up the child life department and say, hey, X and X wrestlers from this company are coming in. They want to visit the kids. And the kids' faces would light up when they would see the larger than life superhero mythical like figures with the big shiny gold belts and the muscle shirts. It was so wonderful. And that became my earliest experience in my connection with work with children. Now, again, I like to say that the universe had other plans. I ended up doing an internship at the then Empire Sports Network, which was owned by John Regas, who used to own the Buffalo Sabres and the television station, the Empire Sports Network in Buffalo. Long story short, is he ended up going to prison for embezzling money from his company and whatnot. So I went from getting my foot in the door as an intern at the Empire Sports Network to wondering, what am I going to do? And so I ended up working in collections for a little over 13 years. Now, again, one of the things I encourage your listeners to be able to understand is that sometimes it's very challenging to look back on your life and say, well, why did this happen? Or why did this happen? And everything in life is here to work with you. Life is here to work for you. Nothing here is to take you down or whatever. It's just a matter of being patient with the process and very gentle on yourself. So I worked in the collections industry for 13 years, which taught me a lot about communication, taught me a lot about listening to people along the way. It wasn't necessarily the best energy. It was kind of like a very dense energy. And I got to a point after running through experiencing some health challenges in my life around 2011 or so, that I really wanted to make a difference in my life. 2011, 2012, 2013. My grandmother ended up passing away in the summer of 2013. And that's really when my spiritual awakening began. And shortly thereafter, I ended up releasing Monday Night Mayhem, the wrestling radio show, back into the universe. It really no longer served me. It wasn't connected with wrestling in the way in which I was before. And shortly thereafter, in the spring of 2004, it was the summer of 2004, actually, I said, I want to be able to help and inspire people. And at that particular point in time, many of your listeners, they may be familiar, they may not. There's a publishing company called Hay House, which works with some of the largest inspirational, spiritual, and consciousness-based authors and speakers out there. And they had an event called I Can Do It. And they had a lot of their big time authors and speakers on stage, and you can meet them, get their books signed. And I came back, I remember traveling from the QEW from Toronto to Buffalo. And I said, I want to help people. I want to inspire people. I want to serve people, but I don't know how. When I was still, working with my wrestling radio show, I was still kind of helping out some entrepreneurs here. And there was kind of like a freelance kind of thing. And so I had opened up my publicity company called Empowered by John at that particular point in time. And that was in the summer of 2014. And I still I knew what I was doing, but in many respects, I was still learning along the way. I was learning a lot more about, alignment and communication and listening. And even the name of my company at the time, Empowered by John, what's that? So it's really the importance of clarity, having a greater idea and understanding of how you wish to communicate from your heart. How do people know how they can benefit from working with you, how you can support them in the process? The next evolution in that was empowered publicity, which was in place for a long period of time. And it was really the next evolution in place. But there were different sorts of experiences that I had along the way. Two specific things come to mind. One is that I've shared this publicly to a certain extent. Certain people may not be aware, but I was given a testicular cancer diagnosis in the summer of 2016 or 2015, I believe. And it was really, I feel, the universe's way of saying that you can learn to finally love yourself. And we were talking about self-care a short time ago. I'm sure we're going to expand on that a little bit more. And whenever you're an entrepreneur, the importance of expressing and embodying that self-love and self-care, to give that to yourself in the process. So that was one of the things that I knew that the universe was really asking me to pay attention. And I was really paying attention along the way. I made the decision to move from Buffalo out to San Diego in the fall of 2020. I had always felt a strong connection here to this area. In 2005, I was out here for the first time in my life and experienced the greatest night of sleep I was at this beautiful spot called Children's Pool Beach and right in La Jolla, had this wonderful energy about it. And I knew that I was being called to California, especially after my grandmother had passed away. I was no longer resonating with Buffalo. And so I made the leap. And that was about, 15-ish months or so ago. But, fast forwarding to PR from the heart, it's very interesting, Donna, because PR has the energy of it. When you hear publicity, when you think of PR, it can feel like a dense energy or a transactionally based energy. And we see a lot of people out there wanting to promote what they're doing. And a lot of it can kind of come across as infomercially based or very pushy, forcey kind of energy. And I never realized, well, I kind of did, when you turn on the television, there's a lot of fear-based stuff, fear, hysteria, chaos, panic, stress, anxiety, you name it. You've seen things over the past couple of years ranging from politics to COVID to police brutality to the vaccines, you name it. It's not always the highest and best. It's not always the highest light. And I was really starting to see the importance of being able to share messages of hope and healing and kindness and inspiration and love and sharing those on television. So I had a client that I was working with, and she had mentioned to me, she said, John, I've done 4 television interviews and I don't feel fulfilled. And I had to sit with that because, I was stepping into greater awareness, greater listening capacity. It took me a long time. I always like to joke around, Don, and say that I went to school for broadcasting. So I learned how to talk, but listening is an acquired skill. It involves practice. And I really had to sit with what she shared. And I was telling myself, I said, I'm really at this point right now where I desire to be in my heart, to live in my heart, and to serve in my heart, and to really be able to help authors, especially those in the kid lit community, to be able to help them where they are right now and to get them to where they want to be able to provide the best service for them with where they are at. Because publicity, I always use the analogy, it's kind of like walking into Toys R Us. I still refer to Toys R Us, the long-running toy store, in the present tense, even though it's only still open in Canada, right? When you go and you see, Toys R Us, there's the Barbie dolls and the action figures and the board games and the stuffed animals. There's so many things that you can do. And it's a matter of how can you do your part to feel into what is the best thing for you. And it helps to be able to have a roadmap wherever you're going in life, especially in your business. It helps to be able to have a game plan. And so, a lot of times it takes time. This is how things come full circle, Donna. It takes time for all of us to be able to truly get to where we want to be in life. And, as I told you off air in the writer parachute green room, it's taken me 7.5 years to get to the business that I always wanted to have from day one. And I've been blessed along the way to be able to support dozens of authors over the years. And it's been such a joy to bring happiness and love and excitement and knowledge and fun into the minds and hearts of kids. And I'm really hoping, Donnie, one of our greatest experiences together, if I may briefly share before we continue on, is that, one of the things that we've really missed during this COVID time is being able to get out there with the kids, right? It's been all virtual. It's been 2 squares on a screen for almost 2 years kind of thing, right? And to let your listeners know is that, both you and I had the opportunities to be at the Tucson Festival of Books in 2019, 3 years ago. And it was such a wonderful experience. You were at a school out in the Tucson area, and just how you made such an impact on those dozens of kids. It was so awesome. It was such a joy to be there and to be able to see you in your element and doing 2 television interviews, and then, bringing your characters to life when you were signing copies of your books for the kids. Like, that's more of what the world needs, whether it be events at schools or churches or libraries or community centers or the larger book fairs and book festivals. It's a matter of, and I'm sure that we'll talk more about this, it's a matter of, we're at the beginning of 2022. What can you do as an author and illustrator to be able to position yourself to where you want to be in the springtime, in the summer, in the fall? Because things are getting better. There are many blessings and miracles that are happening right now. It's just a matter of, I'm so grateful. I have such gratitude and appreciation in my heart for this opportunity to help authors. And I think the one other thing that I'd like to share is that I remember having a conversation with a dear friend of mine, John Para, who's one of the top illustrators in the world. And I still believe this. And we were saying, you know, how lucky we are. We get to wake up every day and to be of service to the children and to children's authors. But it's especially about the children. And there's many people out there that work 9-to-5 jobs and they don't necessarily like their boss or their job, or they're not in a good place in their life. And it's just, I have such joy in my heart right now as PR from the Heart is now out in the world. And even over the past couple of years, like, PR from the Heart was always there. It was technically the nickname of Empowered Publicity. And it was just kind of like waiting off in the wings for me, if you, when I was ready. And now I am, Donna, and I'm so excited.
That is such an amazing story. And there were so many things I wanted to jump in and talk about. You know me, one of my favorite things to say is you got to learn something new every day. You know, that's what keeps you inspired. That keeps you moving forward. That's what keeps you energized. So that was one thing. There was also, we talk about going into these hospitals, and it's like, I don't promote that, but I do try to get into these hospitals to read to these kids, because these kids are at their lowest, most vulnerable moment. And that's the moment when they really need us, these children's authors and entertainers, to step forward and say, you know what? We appreciate you. We love you. We want to help you, and we want to help you feel better. Because I know at the bottom of that, you talk about being heart-centered. It's like, that's why you and I kind of get along really well and work together well, is because we're both very heart-centered. It's like, I feel like if you're following your heart around, that there's not a whole lot you can do that's wrong. So, sometimes we got to let the heart lead instead of the brain. I know the brain needs to be involved in there, but, I always find if I'm leading with my heart, there's not much I can't do. And beyond that, you and I have worked together since 2018 when I released my first children's book. And I got to tell you, you're so much more than just a PR person. John took me aside and he helped me learn to speak, how to prepare for interviews, how to be ready and, kind of on my game when it came to these moments when you're called upon to be. And, I don't know if most people that know me know that when I'm around kids, I light up and I turn into a completely different person. Not that that's a bad thing, but I am sort of reserved and matter of fact and just straight down the middle kind of thing. But when kids come into my life, it is such a joy and an energy that takes over me that I can't help being more playful and more energetic and more involved in them. So I do appreciate you allowing me those moments to kind of come out and shine in that way. So, we have so many authors and writers that listen to this podcast, and they are so confused and very unnerved about the whole marketing, promoting, and doing interviews. And I got to tell you, I know when I first met you, I was terrified. I was just like, I can write a book all day long. I can go out and do book signings. You put me in front of a camera and I'm just like, no. But I mean, you changed all of that, and I do appreciate that. So,
you're welcome.
How does PR from the Heart guide them through that challenging process?
It's a great question, Donna. And I also want to acknowledge how far that you have come, first of all, because it has been such an amazing experience to see where you were and to how far that you've come, but knowing that from day one, I saw and felt that within my heart. I felt it was a vision in my mind's eye that you knew that you would be at this particular point in time. And just the fact that you've flourished and grown with your own work, and now you're helping other authors and illustrators with their work, and many awards and accolades like this. It's just, I'm so happy for you on so many different fronts. It's always a matter of, a lot of times in life when we have a problem, we can kind of marinate in the energy of the problem. And it's a matter of, there's always a solution to the problem. It's very difficult for an author, especially when you're in your head. Now, it's important to be in your head when you're meant to be in your head.
Right.
But it's a matter of taking the time to help authors to trust their own intuition and to follow their heart. Now, again, that might not necessarily be a PR kind of thing and whatnot. I always have let people know for years, I'm not the traditional publicist. If anything, I feel that I've been blessed with the skills, the gifts, and the talents of a publicist, but it kind of comes in a little bit of a different form, so to speak, and whatnot. So a lot of times when you think of, again, publicity, it's just very either a transactionally based energy, or it's about pitching, like very dense kind of energy. And several things that come to mind is being able to, authors are at different places on their path. So there's some authors that it's their first book and they've never done a television interview or a podcast or nothing. It's just like, I'm brand new into this world. And then there's some authors that have written multiple books. So they have experience in the writing and in the publishing, but not necessarily, they've been more of doing the digital marketing or just kind of, relying on word of mouth. And then they're looking to do interviews. There are some authors that have done a series of podcast interviews, but they necessarily haven't felt comfortable or confident or ready to go into that next level of larger nationally syndicated radio show interviews, larger television interviews, things of that nature. And then there's some authors that, they've kind of done a sampling of all that, multiple books, multiple podcast interviews, multiple radio interviews. They've even done a television interview or two. And it's a matter of, well, how can I get onto shows like the Drew Barrymore Show, the Kelly Clarkson Show, NBC's Today, Good Morning America, CBS Mornings. So first, it's really a matter of communicating with the author and listening to their story and their goals and their needs, especially with their problems as well, too, because I like to really feel right now that I can provide solutions to authors' problems. If I can provide them with a solution, with an answer, and it's in the form of a service that I have, wonderful. If it's in the capacity of some sort of a coaching or mentoring, awesome. I always like to believe that if there's a way that I cannot help an author, but I know someone who does, I can help them with that. It's very easy to also be overwhelmed with publicity because, again, there's so many different ways that you can promote your message. And it's a matter of connecting with the author and actually asking them, what are some of the avenues that they feel can help them the most? Is it more of going down the route of television? Is it going more down the route of being podcast? Because some people down it, as you mentioned, like when you hear, hey, let's do a television interview, it's like, eek, I don't know if I can do that, right? And some people are more comfortable. They might be camera shy more, and they just want to be able, they're okay with having their voice out there. Some like to have more of the book reviews or, more of the written interviews kinds of things. So it's really communicating with an author because there are so many different ways right now, so many exciting ways and avenues to get your message out there. And I think the other thing that also comes to mind as well, too, is to be able to help to create a plan, a roadmap, and a strategy, right? Because, yes, there's, whether you're religious or spiritual, there's kind of like God's plan and the universe's plan. Then there's your plan. So it's important to be able to pivot as necessary and guide as you go. But for example, Donna, like you're in Sacramento, right? Just using this as a specific example. So if there's a children's author out there and that says, I want to be able to share my message, how do I go about doing that? Well, a suggestion that I could say is to map all of the real estate, not in that like the housing development in the Sacramento area, but there are the NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox affiliates and the NPR affiliate and the main newspaper in Sacramento, which I believe is the B, if I'm not mistaken, right? So, and then you start there and you maximize all of that. And then you branch out into other cities that are nearby. You can get into a San Francisco, a San Diego, and then eventually you get into Los Angeles. right? So you're kind of maximizing California. Some authors, if they're in a smaller market, they may start outside of their smaller market and then kind of work their way back, because then they'll have larger opportunities to help them get into the smaller opportunities back in their neighborhood. Some authors just want to go for the gusto. Nothing wrong with that. And, hey, I'm ready to be on the Today Show or Good Morning America or Kelly and Ryan or something along the lines of that. So my advice for authors right now is, first of all, to ask yourself if you feel that publicity can help you. Because sometimes authors will get confused between publicity and digital marketing. And I think it's important that there's the distinguishing difference between the two. Digital marketing is more Amazon ads, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, building. It's also building your mailing list. It's kind of that kind of thing, right? It's just direct to the parents, direct to the grandparents, direct to the educators, that kind of thing. Whereas publicity, it's really shining a light on your message and creating awareness and visibility for your brand and you, letting people know that you exist. And it's important also for authors to be able to recognize, and this is something that I wanted to touch upon briefly, is that sometimes authors may say, well, if I do publicity, how can this help and benefit me in the short term and in the long term? And people such as teachers, librarians, educators, bookstore owners, those who are in charge of parenting conferences, those who are in charge of speaking engagements, right? Especially if you want, let's say you're a children's author and you want to have a TED Talk at some point in time. Having some form of publicity, especially television, can help open those other doors and avenues and opportunities for yourself, especially because television, which is a focal point of PR from the heart, facilitating feature television interviews for children's authors. It's a matter of sharing your message in a compact fashion, a professional fashion, a very visible fashion, one that really connects with, because when you think of children's authors and children's books, you think of visuals and the illustrations and sharing those as B-roll on screen. That helps you to be able to directly connect with the heart of a parent or an educator or a grandparent, as I like to say, those who love great children's books in the process. So it's really asking yourself, do you feel publicity can help you? Do you feel that you're ready to be able to work with a publicist or learn from a publicist? What is it that you're feeling dedicated to spend in terms of your PR, your publicity budget? There's some authors that I work with that want me to work with them as their full-time publicist. There's some authors that will say, John, I'd like to kind of start off doing a starter publicity package. What does that look like? There's different ways, not only that I can help and support, but different people in the kid-lit community that can help and support you. So the last thing to share is to just know that you are supported. You don't have to go through this journey alone. There's wonderful people like Donna, like myself, like many people out there that can help you in terms of getting the message out on your book in the process.
Right. And, just as an example to kind of tie a nice, neat, pretty bow on this, for Jonathan, when I met him, I came to him, I already had the event set where I was going to be at the Tucson Festival of Books. Also, that I was going to be at the LA Time Festival of Books. And he actually worked with me on those events, and we expanded into a school visit while I was there in Tucson. We also did 2 TV interviews. We visited the Children's Hospital. And met with so many other children's authors to kind of do collaboration and outreach, which those things are building blocks that I found that, they may not exactly give me what I was expecting, but they always give me something unexpected. The connections sometimes are more valuable than possibly the book sales. So you have to kind of look at what it is that you want to get from it. And then when we went to the LA Times, one of my most absolute heartfelt moments came when I was in LA, and Jonathan set up for me to go talk to the Midnight Mission Home Life program, talking to these families who are trying to get back on their feet after being homeless. And it was really hard. How can you tell somebody that is struggling that hard, and you're standing there with, your life, kind of your dreams coming true? How can you talk to them and get them to understand? But I really tried to work at that and come at it from their point of view. And Jonathan was very helpful in guiding me towards that. But at the end of the day, it was just sharing my heart. And I had a 13-year boy come up to me and tell me that my words made a difference in his life. They were words literally from the book that I read. And I can't tell you how much that changed my focus on what I was doing and where I was going and how I wanted to promote things. So you kind of have to go in with some expectations, but you do have to be a little bit more flexible and know that it's all going to come in time. And whether it comes in book sales or just meeting the right person to get you to the next level, it all works well together. And
Yes.
I would have to say that, the biggest obstacle I've seen for most children's authors, especially, is to find that talking point about their book that can be unique and different in how it can add to the conversation that these parents and educators and grandparents are having in their home or want to have in their home. So sometimes that's a little bit of a tricky thing. And I know Jonathan's really good at helping, and I keep calling him Jonathan. I've known him for years, so it is John, uh, but that's a really an important point to make. So I know that you do amazing things. As I said, I've worked with you for years, but beyond the PR firm, you also provide some other opportunities for authors and illustrators to promote their work. So you want to tell us about those, because those are some pretty exciting things that you have going on beyond the PR from the heart.
I appreciate that, Donna. Yeah, in terms of, PR from the heart has different, it's not even just ways of service in terms of helping and supporting children's authors. Traditionally, when you think of publicity, it's just pitching out to those kinds of stations. And I obviously do that in terms of facilitating book and media tours and TV interview facilitation. But there's three things that I really hold near and dear to my heart. And one is the Children's Book Spotlight Series. And that's the program that I have hosted over the course of the past 3+ years, where I interview children's authors and illustrators who I refer to as some of the shining stars. I always have my shining stars with me, Donna, in the kidlit community, ranging from first-time authors all the way to New York Times bestselling authors and illustrators. It's one of the longest tenured programs in the kidlit community in terms of video-based podcasts. It's interesting because going back to Monday Night Mayhem, and I did that for over 10 years. And then I did a health, wellness, spiritually aligned and inspirationally based podcast called Soul Luminous Radio. And I had the chance to interview, New York Times bestselling authors like Jack Canfield and Anita Moorjani, the New York Times bestselling author of Dying to Be Me, Wayne Dyer's family. This has been such a joy to be able to do, I remember, I had a conversation with my grandmother, and I said, Babcia, it's Polish, your grandmother. I said, this is when I was really making more of a commitment. It was, probably around 2018-ish or so, the beginning. Yeah, it was 2018. I want to spend more time working with children's authors and supporting them. And so the first thing that came to mind is, well, why don't you start interviewing children's authors and illustrators and get more comfortable in that sort of vibe and element? And, the program is now approaching its 140th episode, and being able to interview people such as Peter H. Reynolds, one of the top children's authors and illustrators in the kidlit community, New York Times bestselling author, and Susan Verde and Dan Yaccarino, and just interviewed Matthew Cordell, the Caldecott medalist. Many remember him from the first licensed Mr. Rogers picture book autobiography, Hello Neighbor, The Kind and Caring World of Mr. Rogers. He just released his brand new book that we talked about on the Children's Book Spotlight series, Cornbread and Poppy, which is his first early reader book as well, too. And the program has reached tens of thousands, if not more, of people around the world. And just like, back when I did Monday Night Mayhem, Don, it was so about, reach, more people. But that was the driving force for me. And not to necessarily say that that's a bad thing, but I really lost sight of several things along the way. And it's really about, Mr. Rogers, who's been a big source of inspiration for me for the past several years. He uses the term expressions of care. And I really feel that PR from the Heart has these expressions of care. And one of them is the Children's Book Spotlight series. I've had more fun doing the Children's Book Spotlight series more than maybe anything that I've ever done in my entire life, but somehow it managed to get better than that. So when I was living in Buffalo, It was around right before the pandemic started. I began having a close relationship with WIVB, which is the CBS affiliate in Buffalo, and started doing some regular features with them, talking with children's authors and children's books. And I knew before I moved to San Diego that I wanted to be able to start a children's book review segment in San Diego. But of course, I had to get out here, first things first. And I connected with the wonderful team at CBS 8, which is the largest television station here in San Diego. Even their logo, it's got like a little wave on it. Just really resonated with that, right? And so January of last year, we're now celebrating the 1-year anniversary of what is Empowering Reads for Kids, which is the official television book review segment of Empowered Publicity. So you as a children's author can have your brand new book be featured here on CBS 8, the CW San Diego. And it's not just the traditional children's book review segment. So my co-host is Laura Kavanaugh. She's the host and executive producer of San Diego Living, which is the popular lifestyle segment that airs during the third hour of the CBS 8 morning show. And we literally bring these brand new children's books, again, from the shining stars in the kid-lit community. There's those stars again, Donna, of PR from the heart. And we bring these books to life. So when you take the opportunities to share not just a description of the book, because it's so much more than that. Laura and I, we communicate and talk about some of the heartfelt themes and messages that are found within each book, why each book is important for kids at this particular point in time. And while we're talking about the book, you can see some of the illustrations on screen. So if you're a parent, if you're an educator, if you're a grandparent, you can really connect with the heart of the author, connect with the heart of the book. And I really love as well, too, and this is where a publicity term comes into play, call to action campaigns. So authors have the abilities to be able to connect with teachers, librarians, and principals here in San Diego, which is a community that really cares about bettering the lives of children, especially through children's books. So if you're an educator in the San Diego area and looking to book a virtual or in-person author visit with X and X author, on screen shows the author's website and social media platforms, as well as how the author can have their book purchased via their website or Amazon. So it's not just a way to move books, but it's a way to be able to establish a niche, a community outside of where you live, and to be able to do it in San Diego, which beautifully enough, Donna, San Diego is nicknamed America's finest city. A little did you know. And then lastly, going back to the whole Mr. Rogers front, around the time when the Won't You Be My Neighbor documentary came out by Morgan Neville, this is before the Tom Hanks movie came out, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I started to have the true privilege of connecting with the team at the Fred Rogers Center in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, which is where Mr. Rogers, all of his personal archives and artifacts are there. So you've got the trolley, and you've got his sweaters that are there, and the puppets, Daniel Striped Tiger, Prince Tuesday, all of them. And I began learning more about the life of Mr. Rogers. And he cared about children maybe more than any person that I've ever met in my entire life. And so I had the opportunities to connect with and interview Officer Clemens, Francois Clemens. He had a book that came out, so I interviewed him. And then I connected with David Newell. And David Newell, for all of your listeners and viewers, they may remember him. They may say, who's David Newell? He played the beloved Mr. McFeely on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the mailman's speedy delivery. And David and I had interviewed David a couple of years ago, and the interview was great. It reached nearly 6,000 viewers. It was really cool. And we always wanted to work together, but we necessarily didn't know what that would look like. And so came, 1 year ago, came the Neighborly Reviews bookcast, which is where David and I would take the time to be able to deliver, as an homage, because you deliver the mail. So we deliver heartfelt reviews of the newest heartfelt books from the shining stars. There's those shining stars again, Donna, in the kid-lit community. So to be able to, if you would have told me 7.5 years ago, John, you're going to be working with David Newell from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, I would have said, there's no way that's going to happen, right? But David has been so supportive to be able to see someone who has given his life to helping children, to educate children, to open up their minds and their hearts, to give back to families for decades and for generations. And for him he still has his own independent relationship from Fred Rogers Productions. The bookcast is outside of the context of Fred Rogers Productions. But probably one of the cool things, Donna, that we've been able to do through the Neighborly Reviews bookcast, and it airs monthly on on the now PR from the Heart website and YouTube channel. We've had the opportunities to give back to Reading is Fundamental Pittsburgh. Now, many of your listeners and viewers, they may have heard of at least Reading is Fundamental. That is the largest non-for-profit national, the largest children's literacy non-for-profit organization in the United States. And they provide children's books, literacy tools, and developmental resources to children that come from low-income families. So David still hangs his hat in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's where Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was filmed on, of course, for many years out in that beautiful city. And so, to be able to give back to the Pittsburgh community, to thank David for his time in working with me on the bookcast, every month there is a charitable donation from PR from the Heart that is given to Reading is Fundamental Pittsburgh. So last year alone, we were able to raise nearly $1,000. PR from the Heart was to be able to give back to Reading is Fundamental Pittsburgh. So that can buy a lot of children's books and a lot of resources for kids. So being able to create these different ways, not only to be of service, to be able to give back as well too. Because again, circling back to what we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, publicity can just be, okay, pitch me out here, I want to be on this show and whatnot. And sometimes it can be boring. Sometimes it can be stressful. It doesn't necessarily have like the highest vibe energy. And it's a matter of being able to create these expressions of care. It's so awesome because I've been so blessed to be able to connect with more of my own creative gifts and to be able to create for authors different sorts of ways outside of the box, outside of the traditional sorts of ways to do publicity. These three things specifically have helped many authors around the world to be able to connect with more children, more parents, more families, and more educators. And it's been, again, such a joy. And the best really is now just starting to happen right now, Donna.
Oh, well, that is so amazing. And I've been fortunate enough to have one of my books reviewed on the bookcast. So I know it's a great program. So I'm going to ask you, again, we have so many new authors and writers here. So what would be your top 3 tips to a new author or someone writing a book, or those who want to seek more PR firm help? What would be the top 3 tips that you would talk to them about regarding marketing, promotion, and getting, press or press releases out about their books?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is breathe, which may seem, because it's kind of like, I envision like if you're a fan of the Summer Olympics and there's diving, right? And there's times if you're a diver, right? It's kind of like you're at the end of the diving board and you literally, it's like you're almost off the diving board and it's like, I'm taking the leap, right? To just breathe and know that you're supported throughout the whole writing process, editing process, publishing process, and PR publicity process, that you are supported. So it's important to breathe and know that you're supported. And again, this isn't necessarily the traditional sort of publicity kind of thing, but I always believe, Donna, that what you believe about yourself, if you believe in life, things are going to work out, that your book is going to be a success. Some people call it law of attraction. Some people call it just the power of positive thought. There's something to that, right? Because if you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail, I'm going to screw up, things aren't going to turn out well, there's a greater chance you're going to kind of attract people or experiences in your life that will kind of match that as well too. To be able to take the time on your end of things to ask yourself, are you ready? And if so, what does that necessarily look like? To be able to take the time and have as much clarity as possible. So the second thing really is clarity. How is it that you feel that publicity can help you? What are some of the different kinds of outlets that gravitate to you? Because again, it's very easy to get lost and say, well, I want to do all television or all radio or all podcast or all newspaper. And then you can kind of just get yourself overwhelmed. And the third thing that really comes to mind is to be able to trust yourself. I've been really talking about this with clients of mine, friends of mine. Heck, I've even been talking about it to myself, during this wonderful launch phase of PR from the Heart. It's a matter of, you have to, at this particular point in time, believe in yourself. you're going to be attracting the right people. You're going to be attracting a really great support system for yourself. You know your message better than anybody else. I even told you this when we were, working more extensively together. Like, I always see myself when I work with a client, I see myself as an extension of them. So if someone asks me, hey, tell me about Donna's work, I can share with them about Donna's work, right? But that you know your message better than I do. And there has been and still continues to be an empowerment component in the work that I do, because I help clients that I work with to be able to empower themselves. Many of my clients that I'm working with right now have gotten to the particular point in time where they're either starting to, be attracted to agents or being on larger sorts of television programs. They've been kind of, moving through the publicity process to where they're at that particular point. If anything, it's just so amazing to be able to see authors be more confident in themselves and in their message, and knowing what is a greater chance of working for them. So sometimes you kind of have to weed things out through experience in terms of what doesn't work to get to the point of what works. And then just knowing the fact that, like, for example, when an author takes the time to be able to connect with me, a lot of times when you, and this is, if I could kind of add a fourth thing, is that when you're choosing to work with someone, sometimes when you think of entrepreneurs, it can kind of have a very interesting energy surrounding it. Even though I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a businessman, I don't feel I sell anything. Thus, I don't feel the need to upsell. So to be able to be open-minded and open-hearted whenever you talk to someone, if it's someone that's going to help you with your illustrations, if it's going to be someone that's going to help you with your editing, if it's going to be someone that's going to help you with your publishing, if it's going to be someone that's going to be helping you as an agent, if someone that's going to be helping you in the world of PR and publicity, go in open-minded, because I've seen the number of people over the years that have said, John, I've gotten burned by this publicist or this PR firm or this person. And it's kind of like we kind of have this wounded baggage that we carry with us, this old story. And I always believe that in life, we have the opportunities to look at things through different lenses. And if we go into something, even if we necessarily didn't have the best experience working with such and such or being friends with such and such, we go into that experience more open-minded, more open-hearted, trusting the fact that you're always on a higher wavelength each and every time, you're going to be attracting better and better and better people into your life. So again, these aren't necessarily the traditional sorts of PR things. Well, you need to do this and you need to do this. And I feel that when you lay this kind of foundation, these sorts of things like, taking the time to be able to trust and breathe and not being overwhelmed, then you have a greater clarity of what it is that you want to do. And obviously, it also helps to be able to know who your audience is as well. If I can also mention that as well. So obviously, when you write a brand new, children's picture book, you're not connecting with the same audience as, middle graders, for example. So I hope I answered your question with that. I think I did.
You did great. And you actually kind of set me up really well for what we're going to talk about as the tip of the day. We're actually going to talk about knowing your audience and how important that is to when you're promoting your book in any way, shape, or form, or getting publicity for yourself. So we're going to talk more about that, but we're going to shift gears just a little bit here. And a little birdie told me that you're working on your own children's book, and it's been a passion project. Can you tell us a little bit? I mean, can we get like a first in the market sneak peek behind the scenes look at this amazing book that you're going to write? I mean, talk about a journey. He went from all of this wrestling background and promotion background and talking to all these children and connecting with people from, I'm having a blank, Rogers.
And, Mr. Rogers, yes.
Mr. Rogers, and now you're here writing your own book. So what can you tell us about that?
It's many people that I've worked with, have been colleagues with, have been friends with, have always said something to the effect of, I know how to help promote other people's messages. Mm-hmm. When it comes to sharing my own, there can be feelings of unworthiness, or who's going to care about little old me's story or whatnot, or we can just have different sorts of upward limiting problems. whether it be procrastination or delays or things of this nature. I have known for some time that I was meant to write children's books, plural, not just one, but several. And, whenever, and, I've spoken with writers over the years, or those who have the idea of a children's book. And there's a lot of times we all have great ideas. I want to do this and it's going to be great and whatnot, right? Well, eventually you get to a point where you have to take necessary guided action. And I remember I was with a children's author visiting Children's Hospital in Buffalo, Oshai Children's Hospital. It might have been 2017. It might have even been 2018. Could have even been 2019. I think it was 2018. And she had mentioned to me, she said, John, have you thought about writing your own children's book? And I started to create, or I should say, really connect with my heart what this would necessarily look like. And as you shared, and as people can see from going to the PR from the Heart website, one of my long-term visions is opening up a children's hospice for terminally ill children in La Jolla, which is a part of San Diego. It's right where the La Jolla Cove meets the Pacific Ocean. There's an area called Children's Pool Beach. And I walk past it every single Friday afternoon, for the most part, when I head out to La Jolla. And there's this beautiful big building that's right by the Cove. And it's an apartment complex for senior citizens. But every time I've walked past it, I'm like, that's the children's hospice. And so people have asked me, how in the heck is that going to happen? And my response to them is, well, it's going to start through the form of a children's book. And sometimes people get lost when I say that, right? And one of my messages for the children, one of my biggest messages that I share is that love never dies, that it only changes form. And I remember when my grandmother had passed away, on the surface, it may have looked like one of the most challenging experiences and traumatic experiences in my entire life. And shortly thereafter, there were so many different miracles that happened along the way where she was reminding me that she was with me, and she still is. And, so whenever children lose a loved one, it's a very vulnerable time in their life. And I was connecting with that even further when parents lose a loved one, a little one, where they're bringing this little one into the world, and either they pass away at that point, or they're just a few years old, and their whole world is rocked and they're shaken and they don't necessarily know where to turn. And little ones especially, they can have a lot of fears. They can wonder, what'll happen when I die? Is my family going to be taken care of? And it's important to know, Donna, it's so interesting because in life, sometimes we can wonder whether or not things would work out. We have different things that happen in our life, and we're faced with different challenges in our life. And for whatever reason, sometimes we want to hold on to that belief that this is the thing that's going to take us down, or this is the thing that's going to take us out. And so through my children's book, which is in development right now, it's called Walking Each Other Home. And not to give away too much of the book, but there is a little boy who was inspired by a dear friend of mine that actually passed away in his 20s, who I was very connected with through my wrestling radio show. He was the first ever street team president of Monday Night Mayhem. And he's the inspiration for this brave little boy who's navigating through cancer. And he has been given the opportunity by God to be able to assemble a team, the Earth Angels team. And these are all based on, there's 4 Earth Angels that all come from different walks of life, even though they're kind of coined from the same cloth. They're all inspired by real people in my life that helped to I really believe saved me in some sort of a different way. They were definitely there to help open my heart many times along the way. And it's this beautiful story where, children are able to, who are going through some very challenging times are able to receive blessings and miracles. And really, it's something very special. It's something that, just the fear of putting this book out into the world, whether it be because of rejection or, who would like it or whatever the case might be. And I remember when we were in Tucson even, and you say, John, you got to write this damn book. And that was 3 years ago. And it's at this point where, you know, we only have this one life. And maybe for those of you who believe like you're going to reincarnate as a puppy, like you'll still come back, right? But this is the life that you're leading right now. And I really encourage anyone who feels that they have a message to share. It doesn't even have to be a children's book. It can be a spiritual book. It can be an inspirational book. It can be creating some form of service. It can be a non-for-profit. It can be something along the lines of that. If you're feeling called to do something right now, my God, for the past 2 years, many of us have been living in and connected with energies of fear and anxiety, and are things going to work out? And this has been a giant wake-up call these past 2 years to say, how are you going to live the rest of your life? And the one thing that I don't believe that I've had done in my life is any regret. And it's important for me to be able to do what it is that I came here to do for the children. And knowing the fact that if there is any fear or insecurity or doubt, that you have the abilities within you to move through all of that, because none of that is real. That's just from your head. And so this is how things come full circle with regards to PR from the heart. Because many of us, we spend a lot of time up here. When we spend more time in here, things have a greater way of working out. It's not to say that life is going to be rainbows and gumdrops. I still want to meet the children's author who decides to write a book called Rainbows and Gumdrops, because that's going to be a New York Times bestseller, right? But life always has contrast, right? And I also encourage that, again, if there are authors, and I'll be sure to keep everyone, you know, posted on when my book is coming out. You know, I'm envisioning at some point, you know, within the next year, a little over a year, that it'll be published, and just trusting the whole process of, you know, what that looks like. But it's important to be able to start somewhere. Many of us, when we hear the first month of the year in January, you hear New Year's resolutions, right? And I always think that when you use the term resolution, it's kind of like you kind of have a little way to kind of weeble out of that, and you can kind of back out of it. I like to use the term commitment. What are you committing to this year? If you were an author, if you were an illustrator, if you were an editor, if you're a graphics designer, what are you committing to for this year? What are the things that you need to get done this year? What are the things that you need to clean up in your life to be able to get to where you want to be, so that you can complete what it is that you want to do this year? And I know we touched upon it a little bit as well earlier in the interview, but the importance of taking care of yourself. I've seen so many entrepreneurs, you know, I've seen many children's authors as well experience burnout, and they're just run down. And whether it be they're depleting themselves, they're not taking care of their health, whatever the case might be. One of the things that we've also seen from COVID, you just got to take care of yourself. So if there is something that you're in the process of wanting to start working, but if you feel that there's, you know, let's say, you know, you need to give yourself an extra couple of weeks of self-care, even just an extra you day, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But to still stay committed and focused to what it is that you want to be able to do so. I always get very emotional talking about things like this, not even just my children's book, but it's really, when people hear the term walking each other home, there is a spiritual teacher. He's no longer with us in the physical. He passed away several years ago. His name is Ram Dass. And one of his most beautiful quotes, he would always say, we're all here to just walk each other home. And I always like to believe, again, whether you're religious or spiritual, whatever the case might be, I always envision the stairway to heaven. You know, we're channeling our inner Led Zeppelin on the Writer Parachute podcast, right? But it's always, you know, whether it be the teacher who helped us in third grade, whether it be, you know, our mom who helped us, you know, dress up for the first day of school, or whether it be our father who threw us our first fastball, or whether it be, you know, someone who was there when our wife or our husband passed away, you know, a close confidant. It can even come in the form of, let's say, an ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend, right? Every single person in our life is here to help us. They're always here to help walk us home, so that when we do get back up there, the fact that we're feeling confident, that we know what we completed, that we had a wonderful and blessed life. So yeah, that was an extraordinarily vulnerable share that I was not expecting. And in the words of Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I'm going to add my 2 cents in here for what it's worth. You know, this is what I see a lot in working with authors and writers and stuff, is this a vulnerable moment that you have to write about something you're passionate about, because if you don't have passion for what you're doing, it's not going to carry you through.
Yes.
And what the other side of that passion is vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that is very heart-centered, very heartfelt for you. And I know, just knowing you, that you have worked in the community, you have worked towards this for many, many years. Again, we were talking about this book 3 years ago. And what I do know is, no matter what you may think or believe, I know that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of parents and children out there that need to hear those words. Yeah. They need to hear that there is somebody talking about what they're dealing with. Because this is, again, I'm going to draw it back to when I was in LA. This boy that I talked to that was so connected to my words, I think it was not specifically what I said, but that I was talking about his trials and problems and giving it a voice in the world. And, that's all we can ask for, is that somebody hears us and goes on with that conversation. So I wish you all the best with this book. I envision it's going to be an amazing thing. And I envision that it's going to launch you into this children's hospice care center that you're building in La Jolla. So be very, very confident in that going forward. So again, here at the Writer's Parachute, we like helping authors and writers find their perfect landing, but you have a little unique perspective coming from working with authors and writers. So what do you see the biggest problem or obstacle, or I don't know, stumbling block or detour that you see that these authors are creating for themselves when they're trying to promote their books?
The word trying comes to mind. And it kind of goes to briefly back to what you're talking about, being in your head. Mm-hmm. And when it's important to think.
Sure.
It's part of why we're here, is to think, right? But when you can ruminate and be in your head, you create consternation, you can create stories, you can just create things that don't necessarily make sense. And I feel that there's a lot of frustration based on that authors experience, because most people, when they write a book, they want it to be able to reach a large audience. They want to be able to make a difference. A lot of times it's very easy to get sucked into social media and say, well, look at this New York Times bestselling author. Look at how many books that they're selling. Look at what they're doing right now. Look at this latest television interview that they're doing. And you can get very down on yourself. Social media tends to have that kind of impact on us at times. It's kind of like this big phallic symbol. Social media is, look at me, like, look at my new little one, look at this new house, look at this vacation, look at my latest purchase and whatnot. And so it's important to try to not be in your head. And again, I know what this isn't just a way to be able to promote PR from the heart, but to take more time to be able to know the fact that if there is something, there's a message that has been planted in your heart, if there is a book that you are meant to write, that it is going to reach the people that it is meant to, that the people that are guided to support you on your path, whatever that may necessarily look like, whoever that may necessarily look like, whatever the form and shape that it takes in, that is there. And there's so many people in life that don't trust the process, that are wondering, well, life is out to get me, or again, I had these sorts of bad experiences that I had beforehand and whatnot. And it's so important to not necessarily buy into any of that, trying sort of energy. I think that the other thing actually comes to mind is that, there are, I encourage authors to be able to do their research on their end of things, because you can just say, I have a book and it's going to be great and this and that, but it's also a matter of doing the necessary due diligence. So if you're going to work with someone, When people go to the PR from the Heart, when authors go to the PR from the Heart Facebook page, they'll see over 45-star reviews, for example, right? It's been, that is a way of me communicating with authors, indicating that I've been able to work with, that's just a fraction of those that I've worked with over the years, where people have shared how working with me has helped to support and benefit them along the way. And being able to do the research definitely helps. If anything, it helps for peace of mind kinds of things and whatnot, but you're also learning along the way as well too. And many times in life, we would have to learn by getting the lead pipe or the baseball bat over the head. And it doesn't need to be like that at all anymore too. And yeah, there's even more challenges that, authors can face on their end of things. But it's just really taking the time to be able to give themselves the time and the space to do the work that they want to do. So a lot of times, for example, if let's say you're a single mom or you're a soccer dad, or maybe you're working, a full 60-hour week job and you still want to write that children's book, to give yourself the time and space that will support the book that you are putting out, and to not rush, because great things take time. Right. So yes, it's important to still be mindful of time. And if there's something you want to do this year, especially get your book out there, it's important to do that. But again, it goes back, we're talking about self-care again. It just goes back to that whole being gentle and mindful of the process along the way. And I think just one other thing too is that, a lot of times, when you talk to people in the kidlit community, and you can kind of hear this person has a problem or this person has a problem or whatnot. It's so important to acknowledge the fact that everyone is moving through their own journey right now. So just because someone was having a challenge with their book or had experienced problems and difficulties on their author path doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the case for yourself as well, too.
Right, which is exactly why we're here for the Writer's Parachute. It's kind of to pull back the veil on that and show you that we all run into problems. It's like, we all have talents and things that we're good at and things that we're not good at. And so whatever you're stumbling over may not be new or unique to you as a writer or an author, but it might be an interesting perspective for others to kind of avoid those problems if, again, they're lacking those talents. And what I like to say is this kind of, trying to get everything all at once, I call it the Evel Knievel syndrome. And no disrespect for Evel Knievel, but it reminds me of when he tried to jump, the Grand Canyon. And even Evel Knievel built a ramp and he practiced. But I often see this with authors that, they're in such a rush to get that through those final steps and get that book, get it out, get it promoted. And their idea of promotion is, I'm going to run up this brand new built ramp and I'm going to jump that canyon on the first try. And, unfortunately, you're kind of setting yourself up to fail. So maybe do a few practice jumps, maybe build a little bit better, ramp to get yourself off of that Evel Knievel train.
Well, this also, I'll mention the brief expression, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly.
And if, let's say, you want your children's book to look like Rome, sound like Rome, feel like Rome, it's something that takes patience and practice. And I mean, I remember when we were first, again, working together, just briefly mentioning this, when, the first book in the Superhero School series came out with The Courage of a Mouse, you obviously had a certain level of skills, knowledge, tools at that point. And when you're taking your time to write more books, you're perfecting your craft. So acknowledging the fact that this is something that, you're here to show up every day, you're here to show up and to be learn and to learn and to listen and to remain very humble and very appreciative. And again, things always have a way of working themselves out. But I'm so excited, Donna, overall, just for 2022 and beyond, because I do believe that things can only get better from here. I totally believe that. And it's important that authors know that there are more ways right now to be able to share your message more than ever before. And as things continue to open up, post-COVID, there will be things such as in-person school visits even more, and book fairs and book festivals and events at libraries and churches and community centers. I don't necessarily use the term new normalcy kind of thing, but I feel that the heart and the intention the pulse of that will even be more beautiful and more heartfelt than what it was before. So it's, again, it's just a matter of positioning yourself for the best alignment and the best success for yourself in 2022. And I know this is why you're here at the Writer's Parachute and why I'm here with PR from the Heart. And we're doing our part to be able to pledge our support to authors who are taking the next steps on their paths right now.
Right. It's absolutely. And, I'm going to leave you with one final thought. And that is what I know as a children's author, working in children's reading and things before I became an author. Books are amazing because once they're published, they're out in the world from then on. And so it isn't like ice cream that you got to sell it before it melts. You got a little bit of time. And I tell people I don't worry about writing a perfect book because I don't want to live up to that. So I just try to be a little bit better each time. So I hope that helps people in getting over whatever it is that is blocking them or getting in their way, especially when you're thinking about promoting your books, which I'm going to segue right into. How can they contact you?
Well, it's very simple at PR from the Heart. Is the official website is prfromtheheart.com. All social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, are all PR from the Heart. You can subscribe to PR from the Heart's official YouTube channel and be able to enjoy episodes of the Children's Book Spotlight series and the Neighborly Reviews bookcast with myself and David Newell as they premiere. And it's interesting, one other thing to kind of briefly backtrack to what we were talking about before is simplicity. And a lot of times, we can try to have things be very ornate and complex. And just remember, at the end of the day, we're all sharing things for kids. We're not here to reinvent the wheel. We're not here to be able to, reconstruct a city. We're here to be able to share heartfelt messages for children that they're going to love. And when you're following your heart, you're being in your heart, as you said, Donna, 9.5 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, you're not going to go wrong.
Right. And I'm going to go out on a big old limb and just say 10 times out of 10, because
I like that.
I've not been pushed back when I'm leading with my heart now.
Yeah.
But that is such a great thing. And I want to remind all of you that the links to all of Jonathan's social media, his website and everything will be up in the show notes. So please do check those out. And I wanted to thank you for being with us today. But before we close, we're going to pull the ripcord on that tip today. And tip today is about knowing your audience. Knowing your audience is a critical part of writing a book. It comes into play in the early part of just thinking about your book, creating the outline for your book. You have to know what age group and what subgenre and substructure of that you're going to speak to. Now, a lot of people like to say, oh, well, my book's for everybody. And that may be true on a superficial level. But you are trying to speak to and target towards specifics, such as for myself, I work in middle grade, which is the 7 to 12-year-old range. My books are specifically geared towards kids who need a little lift in finding that superhero inside of them, in finding that, choices make heroes, not powers. And that, they have choices in their life that they get to make. And we talk about in the books, in a very kind of adventure caper way, about getting to that moment where they can make those choices for themselves. So I know where my audience is. I know where to find them. And I have that in mind when I'm writing the story towards them. I'm speaking to them in their language, in their kind of environment of what they're dealing with. The topics that I cover a lot of times in my books are straight from some research I'm doing into these age groups, talking to kids and teachers and parents and educators and those around them about these topics and subjects that they are seeing and hearing and asking about themselves. So I know what my readers want to hear, what they want to talk about. I also understand their language. Now, while I speak at my language level, from my background in education, that may not be appropriate for the audience of my book. So again, this goes back to knowing my audience. I'm certainly not going to bring in large, complicated words for them. Now, occasionally, if it serves a specific purpose, I may do that. But for the most part, I use those very strategically because it is important that I don't slow them down. I don't pull them out of the story, that I keep them engaged. So if that means I have to sacrifice some of my big words, I'm perfectly willing to do that because I understand my audience. And it goes further for when you're trying to finalize your book, when you want to decide what category, what themes, and these all keep playing over and over again when you're promoting your book, even when you're out on social media, which is a tool. It will help you target your message, target the people that you want to talk to about your book, is knowing your audience. And again, when you reach out to John and PR from the Heart, when you want to talk about targeting for your promotion and marketing, it is vital that he understand who your audience is to help you get the word out to the right people. It would do you no good to try and promote, a children's books at a nail salon. They're not interested in looking at children's books when they're getting their nails done. So again, it's simple when you think about it, but it is one of those little items that people are like, oh, my book's for everybody, and they just skip right over that step. I want you to take a moment to step back and think about who your audience actually is. And you can think about that on several levels. As I said, my book is generally for 7 to 12 years old. It's more specifically for kids who are searching for answers, who may have some self-esteem, self-confidence, or those who need to find that superhero inside of them and build up that self-confidence within themselves. But even more specifically, it's more likely to be read by a 9-year-old little girl in the middle part of America who may live in a small town and doesn't get to see a lot of these other adventures that people go on, that don't have a lot of experience with different types of friends and that sort of thing. So you can see how you're working on different levels when you're writing, when you're publishing your book, and finally when you're promoting and marketing your book. So I want you to just take a moment and think about that, and do figure out who your audience is. Now, again, as you go through the process, it's probably going to morph and change. You're going to understand it a little better, but at least give yourself some place to start and figure out if you know who that audience is. And beyond that, next step would be to figure out where you're going to find them. So it has been an amazing day here on the Writers Podcast. I am so happy to have John Masiulionis join us today. PR from the Heart, a great marketing and promotional firm. And I've worked with John for years, and I can't recommend him highly enough. And take his advice, know what you want going in. So until then, we hope that your writing and publishing dreams all land on target. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on the Writer's Parachute. Bye, everyone.